Have you ever stood in your kitchen holding a carton of eggs or a bottle of ketchup and paused for a second, wondering why some foods absolutely need to go into the refrigerator while others sit perfectly fine on a shelf? It's one of those everyday habits we follow without thinking, shaped by labels, family traditions, and a bit of guesswork. But behind that simple decision, fridge or pantry, there's actually a fascinating mix of science, history, and even geography at play. Because the truth is, refrigeration isn't just about keeping food cold, it's about slowing down time itself. Today we will uncover the hidden rules that decide which foods belong in the fridge and which ones don't, right here on History of Simple Things. To understand why we refrigerate some foods but not others, we need to start with what refrigeration actually does. At its core, a refrigerator is designed to slow down the growth of microorganisms, tiny bacteria, molds, and yeasts that are always present in our environment. These microbes are the main reason food spoils. They break down nutrients, produce waste, and eventually turn something fresh into something unsafe or unpleasant to eat. By lowering the temperature, usually to around 4 degrees Celsius or 40 degrees Fahrenheit, refrigerators dramatically slow down these processes. It's not that the bacteria disappear, they just become sluggish, almost like they're moving in slow motion. But here's the key detail. Not all foods are equally vulnerable to these microorganisms. Some foods spoil quickly at room temperature, while others are naturally protected. Take raw meat and dairy, for example. These are rich in moisture and nutrients, which makes them the perfect environment for bacteria to grow. Leave milk or raw chicken out on the counter for too long, and bacteria can multiply rapidly, increasing the risk of foodborne illness. That's why refrigeration is essential for these types of foods. It's not just about freshness, it's about safety. On the other hand, some foods have built-in defenses that make refrigeration less necessary. Dry foods like rice, pasta, and flour contain very little moisture, which bacteria need to survive. Without enough water, microbes simply can't grow effectively. Similarly, foods high in sugar or salt, like jams, honey, or cured meats, create environments where bacteria struggle to thrive. Sugar and salt pull water away from microbial cells through a process called osmosis, effectively dehydrating them. In these cases, refrigeration becomes optional rather than essential. Then there's acidity, another powerful natural preservative. Foods like vinegar, pickles, and many sauces are acidic enough to inhibit bacterial growth. That's why an unopened bottle of hot sauce or soy sauce can sit in your pantry for months without any problem. Even after opening, these foods often remain stable because their acidity continues to act as a barrier against spoilage. But if the science seems straightforward, things get a little more confusing when we look at real-life examples. Eggs, for instance, are a perfect case of how refrigeration habits can vary depending on where you live. In countries like the United States, eggs are washed before being sold, which removes a natural protective coating on the shell called the cuticle. Without this layer, eggs become more vulnerable to bacteria and need to be refrigerated. In many other parts of the world, including much of Europe, eggs are not washed in the same way, so the cuticle remains intact and refrigeration becomes less critical. The eggs are the same, but the handling process changes everything. Tomatoes are another interesting example. While they won't necessarily become unsafe outside the fridge, refrigeration can affect their flavor and texture. Cold temperatures can break down the compounds responsible for their taste, leaving them bland and mealy. The same goes for foods like bananas, potatoes, and onions. These aren't dangerous to refrigerate, but the cold can alter their structure or accelerate certain chemical reactions, making them less enjoyable to eat. In other words, sometimes we avoid refrigeration not because it's unsafe, but because it ruins the experience. And then there are foods that live in both worlds, depending on their state. Take ketchup. Unopened, it can sit safely in a pantry thanks to its acidity and preservatives. But once opened, many people choose to refrigerate it. Not because it will instantly spoil, but because refrigeration helps maintain its flavor and quality over time. The same logic applies to items like peanut butter or soy sauce. They don't strictly require refrigeration, but keeping them cold can extend their shelf life. This brings us to an important idea. Refrigeration isn't always about necessity, it's often about optimization. It's a way to extend freshness, preserve flavor, and reduce waste. But it's not always required for safety, and sometimes it can even have the opposite effect. Another factor that influences whether we refrigerate food is how it's processed. Modern food packaging and preservation techniques have changed the rules dramatically. Pasteurization, for example, involves heating food to kill harmful bacteria before sealing it. That's why shelf-stable milk can sit unrefrigerated until it's opened. Canning works in a similar way, sealing food in airtight containers after heating to eliminate microbes. As long as the seal remains intact, the contents are protected from contamination. Once that seal is broken, however, the clock starts ticking. Exposure to air introduces new microorganisms, and without the protective barrier, refrigeration becomes necessary again. That's why so many labels say refrigerate after opening. It's not just a suggestion, it reflects a shift from a controlled environment to one where bacteria can once again begin to grow. So when you step back and look at the bigger picture, the question isn't just should this go in the fridge, it's really a combination of several factors. How much moisture does the food contain? Is it acidic, salty, or sugary? Has it been processed or sealed? And how quickly will it be consumed? The answer is rarely one size fits all. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.